Hello and welcome back. Although at this point I feel perhaps it should be you welcoming me back to YouTube, because I have been quite noticeably absent for several weeks now. Partly that's due to having been traveling for a couple of weeks. I'm pretty sure we were only away for 2 weeks, but it might have been closer to 3. I am a little bit unwell, so I'll try my best not to cough, and if I do, I'll just obviously cut them out. Yeah, I have been quite absent prior to going away. Apart from just being, really busy and things being kind of stressful, I had some quite difficult situations to deal with, and I just needed time to process stuff. So hence there was very little output from me in terms of perfume content. I have loads of things I want to talk about now because things have kind of piled up, and I'm kind of feeling at the point where I'm a little bit overwhelmed, I guess, by everything that I want to do, and I don't know where to start. So I'm just going to start with something super easy, and that is to talk you through the perfumes that I wore the most while I was on holiday. Now, it wasn't purely holiday either. The first week was I was attending a conference and speaking at a conference, and then the following week we were in France, primarily in Paris, the Loire Valley and Versailles, and then we did have a few more days back in Spain, specifically Madrid. Sorry, there's going to be some planes coming over. The door is open because it's a cool day and Poppy wants to lie out in the sun. So yeah, we had a great time. I have to say the trip was exactly what I needed. It came at the right time, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conference. I thoroughly enjoyed catching up with a very, very, very dear friend of mine who lives back in my original hometown. I don't live there anymore, but Beck, it was so lovely to catch up with you. If you're watching, I just honestly, that just made my whole trip, seeing you in person and having a few days to really hang out with you. So yeah, look, let's just get into it, shall we? So first things first, for the flight, I tried to keep my perfume very light. Obviously, when you're getting on a plane and you're going to be on a plane for a long period of time with lots of other people, you don't really want to be spraying lots of perfume because some people are quite sensitive. So I just literally a couple of sprays under my clothes of this Chloe Rose Naturelle. It's a travel size that I picked up from Sephora literally a few days before we flew out. It was just a bit of an impulse purchase. It's just a really pretty rose. It does have a lot of similarity to the original Chloe, but I do feel that this one just has a little bit more of a natural petally sort of vibe to it, and it's just a very easy wearing, pleasant, watery rose fragrance, and it's it's not going to offend anybody. Longevity wise, I still feel like I get fairly decent longevity out of this, even though it is so light and watery. I feel like I could get several hours out of it. Not necessarily projecting, but I could still detect it on my skin and clothes. So really, really enjoying this one. I don't know if I'd ever bother upgrading to a full bottle, but definitely enjoying this travel spray. And then when we got into Spain, I opened up my suitcase and it smelled amazing, which immediately I went, uh-oh, something has leaked. And in fact, it was 2 things that had leaked. I had taken with me these little 6ml vials of Matiere Premier fragrances, and it was the Parisian Musc that leaked because the French flower was already sort of fairly almost empty, but I had topped up the Parisian Musc from the full bottle that I have before we left. So this was full when I packed it. And by the time we got to the other end, there was really only a couple of wears left in it. So for the first day, I basically wore Parisian Musc just to use it up because I didn't want to take these two with perfume in them on the flight back because I knew they were just going to leak anyway. So note to self, these little 6ml vials don't travel very well on aeroplanes. They're fine for, you know, obviously going for a weekend away if you're just driving somewhere, but they do leak if you take them on the plane. Luckily, I had put my little pack of perfume samples inside another container that was kind of leak proof, I guess, so I didn't end up with it all over my clothes or anything, which was pretty good. Plus all my clothes were also in packing cubes anyway, so there was an extra layer of protection there. So anyway, so for the first day, I think I wore Parisian Musc, and then I think I wore it once more towards the end of the trip, and that pretty much did whatever was left in this vial at that point. And then I think on day 2 in Spain, which may have been the day before the conference officially started, I had a meeting, an all-day meeting to attend, and I think I wore French flower on that day. I say I think because I know that I wore it very early on in the trip, but I didn't actually keep a written record of what I wore and when, so this is really just based on my memory. As I mentioned, Spain turned out to be a lot colder than we expected it to be, particularly at night time. The wind was just icy, icy cold. And I mean, this is coming from somebody who lives in the subtropics, so perhaps maybe it wasn't that cold, but for us, it was cold. All of the Australians were freezing, basically. And I had a sample of this perfume in my pack from when we went to a conference in Sydney earlier this year, and Matt had come with me to that. And I actually packed this for him because I thought he might like it. And in the end, I ended up wearing this on this trip, which turns out to be a bit of a surprise because this is one that I have mentioned time and time again I'm not a huge fan of. Anyway, I quite enjoyed wearing it, but only when it was really, really cold and only at night time. So this is a little sample of Le Lion by Chanel. So I still maintain it does have Shalimar vibes, but the reason why this one never really worked for me was because that birch tar in here is quite prominent and it's also quite smoky, and I find it really hard to wear most of the time, even though I absolutely adore Shalimar. But this one is less vanillic, more leathery, more smoky, and I really enjoyed wearing it on very, very cold evenings. Obviously, I hardly wore any of it because there's literally only a few sprays missing. I mean, this stuff is so potent. I just need, you know, one spray and then I'm good. Yeah, that was probably my biggest surprise wear of the trip. The other one that I quite enjoyed wearing was a Fuego Lento by Frassai. I wore this about 3 times on the trip, mostly again in the evenings. So this was my, let's say it was my sexy fragrance that I wanted to wear when I wanted to feel really feminine if we were going out for dinner or something like that, which we did pretty much every night. So this one I really enjoyed wearing, and I distinctly remember sampling this for the first time when I went to Fragrance in Florence last year, and at that time I was very, very sick and I could barely smell anything, but I managed to be able to smell this, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful then, and I still think it's absolutely beautiful now. This is a jasmine dominant fragrance. It has quite an evening feel to it. It's got a bit of a, I guess, a shadowiness to it. There's a bit of fruitiness. I think there's orange flower in here, and there's also just a slight hint of leatheriness to it as well, which I really enjoy how Frassai do this sort of suedey, leathery tone to some of their fragrances. It's very soft and very delicate and you know, very elegant. So that is a Fuego Lento, absolutely beautiful, and again quite potent. Don't need to wear too much of it, so really enjoyed that one. Now, in terms of samples, I also took a sample of number 22 by Chanel with me. I absolutely adore this fragrance, and I wore this on and off during the conference at large, so when we were actually attending the conference during the daytime, and I kind of alternated this with the perfume I'm about to talk about next, which ended up being my, I guess, most worn perfume of the whole trip. And I guess this became the scent of the trip for me this time around. And this is Iris Doux by Puente Parfums. I don't know how to say that. Iris Doux. Maybe it's Iris Doux. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you say it. Eliam might be able to correct me at some point if I ever get around to asking him to do an interview or something like that. I'd love to do an interview with Eliam, who is the owner and creator of this line. This is a really beautiful perfume. It's not... There is definitely iris present in this perfume, but to me, if you were to assume how you feel about iris or what you think iris smells like, this probably isn't going to be matching your vision of what this perfume would smell like. To me, this is quite a green iris perfume, and it's very fresh, very vibrant, not too powdery. It's very perfumey, for want of a better term, and I don't know, it just has this sort of soft yet playful yet professional sort of feel to it, and it just worked really well for the conference, and it worked really well for the weather that we were in as well, because it was cold weather. And I find this to be, even though it sort of leans green, I actually find this to be quite a warm fragrance all round, and that might be to do with what he's used in the base of this perfume. And I don't even know what the notes are. I've never actually bothered to look them up. I'm just assuming it's sort of an ambery base. It's kind of earthy as well. Probably a bit of jasmine in here as well. I find it to be kind of balmy, you know, so like a sunny iris. If such a thing were to exist, this is what it smells like. I really love this perfume, and I thoroughly enjoyed wearing it on this holiday. And like I said, you know, the weather was cold, but particularly when we got to France, it was cold but sunny, because they're coming into spring and, you know, things are starting to warm up on their side of the world. And this just worked really beautifully in that kind of weather. It's also a very strong perfume, so it lasts really well, and which is lovely for when you're traveling, because when you're out and about doing stuff all day, you don't want to have to lug perfume with you, or you don't want to have to think about reapplying perfume. And so I found that this was a really lovely one to wear, because I could also spritz a little bit on my scarf or something and I would get whiffs of it all throughout the day. So that was Iris Doux. Let's just say Doux. I feel like I'm saying duh, which is probably a very Australian thing, and most people might not get that reference. Anyway, the next perfume is also by Puente Parfums. This is a tuberose dominant perfume, and I absolutely love it. I think this will be my next purchase from Puente. This is called Vespertine, and I mean, I have pretty much used up most of it. I thoroughly enjoyed wearing this one. Again, I mostly wore this during the daytime just because of the nature of the florals. So there is jasmine in here as well, but the other main floral that I pick up is orange blossom, which is very bright and happy to me. Yeah, I just, it's very lovely. Eliam seems to have an amazing talent for combining floral elements and working with particularly high concentrations of naturals in his perfumes. You still get this really great, I mean, they're not all natural perfume by any means. He does use synthetics as well, but I don't know, he somehow manages to make them smell very natural, but also you get the separation of these different florals, and you can detect these different florals and they have their own sort of personality, as opposed to everything sort of being jumbled in and kind of muddy. So yeah, Vespertine, absolutely stunning. If you like tuberose, and if you like orange blossom and jasmine as well, then this is a really, really great one to try from the range. And then towards the end of the trip, second half of the trip, we ended up in Paris. I did get to see some perfumeries, but sadly, by then I was getting sick. Well, I was already sick, and it was kind of pointless dragging Matt to, you know, a bazillion different perfumeries if I wasn't actually going to be able to smell anything. And, you know, primarily the 2 days that we had in Paris, one of the days, most of the perfumeries was closed because it was a Sunday. And then on the Monday, by the time Monday came around, I could barely smell anything. So my nose died really, really quickly. Hello, Poppy. And long story short, I basically didn't go to very many perfumeries at all. The two that I made the priority to get to were Serge Lutens and the Guerlain boutique, but not the one on Champs-Élysées, which is the flagship. I only got to go to the Place Vendôme store, which is also still very, very beautiful, but we didn't have time to get over to Champs-Élysées, and I personally didn't have the energy anyway. So the other two perfumeries that we did get to, purely because we passed them along the way, were Bete and L'Artisan Parfumeur, which had a great time in L'Artisan Parfumeur. I'm ashamed to admit I cannot remember. I think the name of the sales assistant was Gwen, and she was really, really lovely. We were the only people in the store when we arrived, and she just, you know, was very generous with her time, showed me lots of things that I hadn't been able to smell in Australia, and gave me a few samples as well to go away with. I didn't end up buying anything because we stopped there on the way to going to Serge and to Guerlain, and I didn't want to make any purchases until after I had been to those boutiques. And then after that, we ran out of time coming back, so we didn't get to stop in on the way back. So I never ended up buying anything from L'Artisan. There was one that I had my eye on, but thankfully she did give me a sample of that. Sadly, it's not available in Australia, so I will have to wait to go overseas if I ever wanted to purchase a bottle of that. But the other store we went into was BDK. Now, I wasn't planning to go into BDK to buy anything necessarily, because we can source BDK pretty readily here in Australia. But I just wanted to go in and have a look at the boutique, because I had remembered seeing the opening of the boutique on social media. So I just wanted to pop in, and we had a really great time in the BDK boutique. Even Matt really, really enjoyed himself. Matt had never smelled many of the BDK perfumes, so for him it was quite a discovery. And he found a couple of things that he liked in there. He particularly liked wood jasmine, and what else did he like? He liked vanille leather. But for me, what interested me, I was keen to try the new one, which is available here in Australia. I just hadn't smelled it yet. But I also got to try one that I'd never tried before, which was called Creme de Cuir. And I ended up buying a travel size of it because I really enjoyed it so much that I wanted to be able to wear it immediately. So this is a very beautiful vanillic citrus fragrance. In a way, it almost comes off custard-like, but at the same time, I don't feel like this is super gourmand, but there's just this lovely silken texture to it, despite the fact that it is a very bright citrusy opening. I was a little bit put off by the name, I'm not going to lie, because of the leather, and I am a little bit funny with leather, but I find this to be really very wearable, very bright, and very smooth and creamy in the wear. And the leather is very subtle and very smooth and very elegant. So I enjoyed wearing this primarily for the last 2 days of the trip. There were a couple of days around the time that I bought this where I just really didn't wear much perfume at all because I couldn't smell it anyway. But certainly for the last couple of days when we were in Spain, this worked beautifully because the weather had warmed up by then as well. And I just, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, and I already have, I guess, worn a little bit of this. So there's a little bit of a dent happening in this travel size. Okay, so editing Cherie here. Actually, I lie, I'm not actually editing, I'm working. But I'm sitting at my desk and I'm wearing this perfume today, and it was a sample that was sitting down on my dresser, and I can't remember if I included it in the video that I just filmed yesterday talking about the fragrances that I took to and wore while I was away. And I just can't remember, and I haven't scrubbed through the footage to see if I talked about it or not. So I'm just filming an extra clip now while I think about it, just in case I did not actually mention it. This is a sample of Bete by Eris Parfums. This is has been on my wish list actually for several months now, and I was hoping to pick a bottle up of it when I was in Europe because I just assumed that there was going to be a store either in Spain or France where I could source a bottle, and there is no stockist for Eris Parfums in Spain or France, so that was a big fail. However, I did have this sample. I took it with me. I'm still about halfway through this sample because this perfume is quite potent, and so I've still got quite a few wears left before I actually have to, excuse me, worry about upgrading to a full bottle. But what I wanted to say was that I'm wearing it today. I've got this beautiful scent bubble around me. It's very warm. It's a very warm, honeyed, leathery, floral perfume. I think it's mostly rose, or maybe it's tuberose. I think it's tuberose actually. But it's got that very vintage feel. So, you know, there's usually, in those vintage perfumes, it's really hard to pick out a specific floral because you usually have things like rose and white florals in there together. And with some, and also with some kind of ambery base. And again, like I said, it's a very honeyed, leathery, floral perfume. It's just beautiful. It's so beautiful. But what I noticed is that when I'm wearing it here at home, and certainly before we went away on holiday as well, I'm getting this, you know, beautiful leathery sort of floral perfume. But when I put it on in Spain, it came off much more animalic than it does when I wear it here. So I don't know if it's something to do with the weather or the types of other smells that are in my environment here in Brisbane compared to where we were in Spain. But it smells quite different when I wear it here compared to when I was wearing it in Spain, which is really interesting to me. And it still smelled like the same perfume, but there were just aspects of the perfume that really came out more when I was in Spain. And I just feel, you know, I mean, it's quite cool here at the moment. It's not as cold as it was in Spain, although it was quite cold this morning when I got up. It's quite warm now. I'm even actually thinking of taking this jumper off because I'm actually quite warm sitting here, and I have the door open as well. But this morning it was freezing. We were all rugged up. Matt was wearing his thermals. And I did put this on this morning, and I didn't feel like I was getting that really animalic vibe from it. So it's just really, really interesting. how this changes compared to environment, which also, you know, is really starting to get me thinking about when I talk about perfumes on this channel and I talk about things that I'm smelling, and then people might comment and say that they get something completely different. I can really understand why now, because I don't think it's just about temperature. I think it's actually a combination of temperature, perhaps, as well as the actual other things that are in your environment at any given time. So that impact on how a perfume might smell to you. Yeah, this is an interesting revelation to me, because I hadn't really, I mean, I certainly hadn't noticed anything like that when we traveled last year, but last year I was so sick for the entire trip and I could barely smell anything. So it doesn't surprise me that maybe I didn't pick up on any nuances between perfumes that I wear or have worn at home and how they smelled while we were away. But let me know if you have experienced a similar thing to this in your travels. And it sort of got me wondering whether or not it's even a safe thing to do to buy perfume when I'm on holiday, because what happens if I buy something that I think smells great when I'm in some other foreign country and then I come home and it smells completely different? So maybe my rule about sampling and taking a sample away and wearing it applies also to things that I'm smelling in person when I'm on the road. So they were the perfumes that I wore on this trip. And interestingly, when I sit here looking at them, none of them are my usual go-to fragrances. I mean, with the exception of maybe Iris Deux and number 22, which I did take a sample of, but I only really wore this once, I think. So I'm quite surprised. I really branched out on this trip and wore things that I haven't really worn that much prior to being on this trip. So it worked out really, really well. I will confess I did kind of miss some things. Like at one point I was really wishing I had thought to bring one of my Doux fragrances, because I've got lots of those little 15ml travel sizes now in the Doux Parfums. So I feel like it was a wasted opportunity to not pack those, and instead I packed these Matiere Premier 6ml ones, but they leaked everywhere, so that was kind of a waste. And I also wish I had taken a sample of Almond Woman, because I think I would have really enjoyed wearing that again in the cold weather. Although we've come back to winter here, so I'm going to have plenty of opportunity to wear Almond Woman in the coming months. So yeah, that concludes this little rundown of what I wore on my trip in Spain and France. It was a very crazy whirlwind trip. We had a great time. It was so fun to also catch up with friends in various locations who were traveling at the time. And yeah, it was only about 2 weeks, but it felt like we've been away for, you know, a month or two. In fact, it feels like we've been away for longer than we were when we were actually away for a month last year. So crazy, absolutely crazy, but awesome. Anyway, I have to go because I think Matt is downstairs talking to somebody. So I'm going to go and finish this so that I can upload it. And I think the next video will be the obvious, what did I buy while I was overseas? I also have had a few other new perfumes come in over the last few weeks. I did film a video before I left going through the new perfumes. However, the audio was abysmal because we had people working on the front deck and there was power tools and banging, and it was just, I couldn't even watch the footage enough to edit it. I just got the shits with the footage, so I'll probably refilm that, and I'll include the perfumes that I actually bought while we were overseas. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much for all your DMs and your tips on where to go, and for, you know, just keeping up the engagement while I've been away. I've really, really appreciated it, and it's also just been really lovely to hear from you while I've been on the road, even though I obviously haven't been uploading anything. So yeah, I'm just really grateful, and the perfume chats have been incredible. All right, for the 5th time, I'm going to go now. So I'll speak to you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.